Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
Good evening, and welcome to North Oakland speaker meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Caroline, and I'm an alcoholic and tonight's secretary. Please turn off your cell phones. Please help me to open the meeting with a moment of silence followed by the Serenity Prayer. God,
we are in the serenity to accept things that cannot change, the courage to change things that can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. This is a speaker meeting. Brett will speak for 10 minutes, and then we'll turn the meeting over to Jennifer, who will speak for the remainder of the meeting. So now, here's someone I don't know at all. Brett.
My name is Brett, an alcoholic. Thank you, Kristen, for asking. My roommate said, just be honest, so that's not always easy for me, but I'll attempt to do my best. I remember eating a lot of pixie sticks as a kid, and then snorting them. And I think I was probably like 8 or 9 years old when I realized that this was something I was doing because it was making everyone else laugh, and I was like, whoa, I'm rushing around on sugar and then crashing and falling on the ground and coming. Anyway, I was like running around a recess and this crazy kid. I remember seeing bottles of Zima in my dad's garage, and I took one, I opened it, I drank it, and I jumped around on the trampoline. And so that was kind of those two instances are examples for me that I can point to, like, okay, that's my beginning relationship with sugar. And sugar and alcohol and other things that I'm addicted to are of the same substance. So I have to really watch myself when it comes to refined sugars and like lactose and gluten and things I'm now discovering being sober. I can look at myself honestly and see where I'm going away from being healthy, I guess is a good way to look at it. About 9 months ago, I had surgery on my toe, and I was prescribed I think Vicodin or something like that, or whatever it was, and I took it as prescribed. I do have a relationship with painkillers, though I didn't really want to admit that in my first 90 days. I actually didn't really remember that. I had a girlfriend in college, and she was ADD, and so she was on Ritalin or something, and I said, oh, let me, it'll help me study, and I was feeling so grateful. I was like, oh, I want to thank my dad, I want to thank my principal, and I was just on, and I was high, I realized, and I didn't really want to do schoolwork. Anyway, so I had to acknowledge that that in this process of surgery, I was like, well, this is, and Robert out there, he took me to 20 meetings during that period. Danny and Nate and all these guys were really a help for me. And I guess my sobriety date is January 22nd, 2011, so just over a year and a half now, and I'm proud of that. I drank a lot in high school. I started when I was 14, and the first time I drank, I got drunk, and I just wanted more and more and more. When everyone else around me passed out, I went for the remainder that was left, and we mixed champagne and red wine and white wine and all this other stuff, Cheez Whiz, crackers. And I played sports in high school, so a lot of my partying was about the after part, after the game and stuff, and going to someone's house and saying, "Mom, Dad, I'm going to go stay the night at Dave's house tonight. I'll see you tomorrow," whatever. And they knew. They came back later on and said, "Brett, we knew you were drinking. We just we didn't really know what to say to you, you know. By the time I was 16, 17, my dad pulled me aside and said, Brett, I think you have a problem with alcohol. Maybe you should look into Alateen. And I had heard about it, but I thought, no, you know, I'm not ready for that. I got kicked off the track team for drinking on the bus on the way home from a track meet. And I was suspended from school. I went to a Catholic high school in Boise, Idaho, and that was, I think it was good for me to have that experience. Then after that, I joined a fraternity up in northern Idaho, University of Idaho, and I flunked out, and I just did all sorts of drugs and drank every day, and I rushed, you know, with this fraternity, but I couldn't. I wasn't initiated, and so all these things, like I felt very insecure. I was living in fear. I was depressed. I was suicidal. By the end of the year, I really just didn't want to live. But I was afraid to like tell anybody or face myself. And really, the only thing that saved me was my work that summer. I was like a camp counselor. So for me, you know, being of service to kids really gave me a lot of hope. And you know, the love that they gave me is really kind of similar to the love that I feel in this room a lot of times, like these free hugs, you know, from strangers, no less. So after, you know, flunking out of college, I had a 0.0. So really, I was that bad. I've heard that in other meetings too. Like I was that same person, 0.0. All right, high five, you know. So I can relate. If you can relate to that, please talk to me after the meeting. But it was terrible. It was so maddening. I was living in fear. I was living a lie, and I didn't know what to do to change. Even when I tried AA for the first time, at, I think probably age 24, I'm 29 now, I knew that I had a problem. So, when I got kicked off the track team from drinking, that was when I think my dad said, you probably should go, you know. And then our family has a history of alcoholism. This is something you need to, you know, look into. Took me a long time. So then when I went back to college, finally I went to Boise State, and I finished from there a few years ago. And when I finally went back, I took all these courses over again, and then finally did well and was successful, and took an English class, and I had to write. So I chose this like ethnography class or something, and I had to go. Well, I chose to go to AA actually. I said, I'm going to go and research this, you know, sociological. It's my personal sociological experiment. I'm going to see what these people are up to. And it was a candlelight meeting. It was like there were like 5 people there, and one of the dudes tried to sponsor me and stuff. And I'm friends with him today. I made an amends to him about a year ago because I was a real asshole to him. Years later, I Facebook messaged him. I was drunk. I'm like, just all sorts of anger and like resentment, and just full of, if you can imagine, like just drunk and like Facebook, I hate all of you. And I did a lot of that. I would get high and I would get drunk and I would just go on Facebook and just like zone out, like, like I was, and now I don't drink, I don't, you know, smoke, I don't do any drugs or anything, but I still am on Facebook like, whoa, you know. So not a whole lot has changed, if you know what I mean. Facebook can be a problem though too. Like, you know, a lot of this addictive behavior still is with me. So, just, you know, one day at a time kind of thing. Kind of jumping around a little bit. So I wrote a paper in college about AA, and I like just copied and pasted the 12 traditions, the 12 steps. And like, I'm up to 7 pages already. That's pretty good. And I wrote about like my experience and how they had, like, they smelled like cigarettes and they had coffee, and just like really just a bunch of like filler information. 4 years later, I'm graduating, and I write like my final thesis paper on AA and how I'm still not an alcoholic. You know, I was like defending myself, and so I'm like, well, what's the symbolism here? Like, am I not really saying this? And so my professor at the time just passed me. He's like, okay, just whatever. I'm sure I don't know whether he or not, he started questioning his own alcoholism or whatever, because he had his own, you know, anyway, but there's something there, you know, I can see it. And I finished, and I knew I had to like get out of Boise. I'm like, okay, I'm done with this place. I knew that if I like stayed any longer, I was just gonna like, I'm either gonna like run for mayor or I'm gonna like kill myself. So, and it was a great place. I've got family in DC, I have family in Boise, and from Oregon originally. But I thought, okay, my mom's in DC now. I had helped a friend move to Berkeley the semester before I graduated. And so I thought, well, maybe, he's like, you should come to Berkeley and, you crash at my place for a while until you're ready to move on and stuff. So I did. I packed 3 bags bought a one-way ticket to Oakland, and I arrived, and I lived with him for about 2 months until I moved out to Oakland, got a job there, got a job in Berkeley, and now I'm working like 3 jobs and sponsoring 2 guys, and life gets bigger and better, and still I have that issue of like powerlessness and unmanageability, and needing to practice, daily inventory and prayer and everything. Like you've taught me so much, and I can't really believe, and probably Robert most of all, he's like, what is this guy saying? Because he knew me when I was like, on crutches and stuff, and everything else. And so I feel like I've improved a lot in my recovery in the past year. But when I first got sober here, actually I was walking to work one morning, and up University, and I looked down McGee, and if anyone knows where Berkeley Fellowship is, I was like 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, whatever, and I saw all these people outside like smoking cigarettes, and luckily for me, I knew what the AA culture in some ways was about, so I was like, oh, cigarettes, 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, okay, that's AA, so that memory, luckily for me, several months later, told me like, okay, I can go there if shit really gets bad. And it did. It got much worse. And this was before I had surgery. So I found myself like putting my hood over my head and asking people for pot and saying, hey, and scrounging around, like using credit on everything. I'd go to Bobby G's and get all sorts of pictures and make friends with the Cheers company, and then I was like started limping because my foot was so bad, and I was like, life is really just really, really bad. And I saw myself and other homeless people around me, the truth is. And when I would look to these men who were limping, I thought to myself, like, that's going to be me if I don't change, if I don't surrender. And I knew that I had to someday, because when I was 18, I told myself I want there to be a day when I when I no longer drink, or use. So that memory of the fellowship, I'm really grateful for that place. It scared me enough that I kept coming back. That I knew that these reminders all around me were good enough that I needed to surrender each day, kind of thing. So I did 90-90. I took suggestions. I raised my hand right away, and I said I need a sponsor. This guy came up to me, and he's still my sponsor today. He has a sponsor, and so on and so forth. I've made amends to my mother. I've made amends to other family and friends, and it's a good experience. It's not easy, being honest. It's not easy making amends over the phone, but I've needed to do that. It's much harder in person. I've tried reaching out to a lot of other people too who aren't available yet. So I have to make myself available when that time comes. In the meantime, practicing these principles in all our affairs, but I still need help. I still need to surrender. I need to ask for my higher power's help. And now, especially now that I'm sponsoring, I have to walk the walk and talk the talk at the same time. And I'm not perfect, but when I make suggestions, they have to be honest ones. They have to be from my experience and proof that I've done something that's improved my life. And I'm sober today because of this program, because of my honesty with myself and another alcoholic and many others. And I have this connection to a higher power that I never thought I would have, even growing up in that, that church and stuff. So I'm grateful to be here, grateful to be sober. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Jennifer. I'm an alcoholic. I tried to get out of speaking tonight. By way of my sponsor, I thought maybe she would take pity on me and my intense fear of people, but she didn't. So I'm sober and I'm here. And I'm really grateful to be here. Actually, I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to be sober. And welcome to the newcomers and to any birthdays. I started drinking when I was 16, and I went to rehab finally voluntarily. I'd gone kind of against my will, but I went voluntarily the first week of April 2006. I was 35 years old, and my last drink was July 23rd, 2007. That's my sobriety date, and that last drink was not momentous. I drank mouthwash, which I've been drinking for about a year. And when I had to tell you guys when I had to change my sobriety date and tell people. That's what I did. Some people said to me, "Oh my God, why did you do that?" And I was so pissed off. I was like, dude, I'm an alcoholic. You're an alcoholic, and you're asking me why I drank something with alcohol in it? Like, give me a break. But I think the question was, why didn't I just have a proper drink? I think that's and, which is a good question. It's interesting. And I was doing something that I know now. I've heard other people share. I'd been to rehab. I'd been clean. I was in AA, and I was supposed to be sober, and I was sneaking drinks. There was a period of time from when I got out of rehab until my last drink that I was still hanging out with people that were using, and I would just, go in people's cabinets and drink things that were not beverages. So I'd always been very depressed. I was a really depressed kid and just a really depressed person. And it was when I was in the 7th grade that I really thought about that fact, and I thought about suicide. And that seems about right. I was 12 years old. It seems really young, but 7th grade is when kids begin to think self-reflectively. There's that change. And I've heard from other people too. At first, when I thought back on that, like, dude, you were 12 years old and you thought about suicide. That is crazy. But I know now that happened to other people. And I was raised in San Francisco where we lived. It was really cold and damp, and my household was like really serious and unpleasant. And if I wanted a ride to the bus stop from my stepdad, who was a workaholic, it would leave for work at like 6:30 in the morning. I had to get up while it was still dark out. So it was like cold and it was dark, and I had to go to school all day, and I hated it. And I was 12 years old, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Which is kind of funny to me, but there was also something else going on, which is that I was very depressed, and I was really nervous, and I was very anxious. And so all day while I'm trying to sit in class and they're trying to teach us, like, I am very worried, and I'm kind of have a mental obsession of like, how do you be normal? How do other people do it? And so I'm thinking a lot, and I'm worried, and that actually was exhausting. So I was kind of like inwardly really tired and emotionally really tired. And I also had a feeling about the world then that was like this inward weariness, and also feeling like, I won't be able to do it. Like, I looked at my parents and I was like, dude, I will never be able to do what they do. Like, I cannot go to work. I cannot, like, how do people do it? I was thinking to myself back then, I was like, I will not be able to navigate in the world. And so I felt very hopeless, kind of like from the get-go. And I was really, really shy and super afraid of people, like, mortified. Like, if I said something wrong and, like, adults laughed and was like, oh, that's funny, she thinks it means blah, blah, blah. I was just like, oh my God, I want to die. I'm so embarrassed. And I'm still that way today. I'm still that way today. But, my mom and my stepdad were workaholics. I'm really surprised that they're not alcoholics. I would think that they were alcoholics, but they're not. And I think that my mom was really depressed. I actually can't diagnose her. I don't know. But when I was a kid, she would be in her bedroom, her and my stepdad's bedroom with the door closed, and I could hear her screaming. Sometimes she'd be screaming really loudly, and sometimes I would hear her crying hysterically really loudly. And I would just be out in some other part of the house, and then my stepdad would like go in the room and try to talk to her. And then sometimes I remember she would scream at me too sometimes. But she was verbally and physically abused as a child her whole childhood, so I'm thinking she probably did really well as a parent with what she had. But our household was like, they worked all the time and they talked about work a lot. And it was just like very intense and severe. And I remember kind of like studying my parents, like my mom, and noticing though that even though they were so uptight, like sometimes my mom would be relaxed and she would say it. Like my mom and I would go out for coffee on Saturdays. That's something we did when I was like a teenager, and she'd be like, this is so relaxing. And I remember inwardly I'd be like, I'm not relaxed. Like, you're relaxed? That's so weird. And like we would go camping in the summer, and sometimes on the lake or in the water, she'd be like, I'm really relaxed. And same thing, I would be like, how do you do that? It's really weird. So I think that my impression, I could be wrong, is that they were adults and they had a way to kind of go hard all the time and then allow themselves a little time when they could calm down. But I was a kid and a teenager, and I really didn't have that off button. Like, I was nervous and freaked out all the time. And I started using when I was 16, and thought I got a lot of relief. But I also got all the insanity. Like, that was it. I got the relief, but I also got like the high highs and the low lows. Like, it was on. And when I was 19, 20, and 21, I was super depressed. I think you kind of like mentioned that in your share, being at school, and I felt really suicidal again, and I thought a lot about suicide again. And then when I was 23 is when that turn happens that we talked about, and I think it's talked about in the book, where I lost the power to choose, if I'd ever really even had it. Like, I was addicted, and I'd get really antsy and anxious and angry and nervous. Like, there was a time every day when I needed a drink, and I needed a drink. And I got really kind of mad at you and like, come on, let's go, when it was time to drink, before I knew that I could just carry alcohol in my purse and drink my life. And I could stop yelling at people. But that time was so weird. Aside from getting sober, that was maybe the most momentous time in my life. It was like 1994. I was 23, and I made this commitment to myself. I was like, I can drink. Like, I can drink until I die. I've seen old people drinking. It's totally acceptable. I've seen them in bars. I've seen them at parties. There's nothing wrong with going in the bar and drinking. I could do it every night if I want. And feeling like, kind of like they say in the book, like, although slightly different circumstances, like, I've arrived. Like, I'm grown up, and this is what I'm going to do, and I love it, and it makes me feel so much better, and like, I have a solution now. I'm cool. And I was drinking in these like really alcoholic bars in West Portal in San Francisco, where everyone in there was an alcoholic, and like it was older people and old people. And like people where you're like, oh my god, that guy's gonna die soon. And in the bar drinking, you're like, oh, okay. So I'd go drinking there in West Portal, and then I would sometimes, like, the streetcar transfer was there. I'd transfer the bus, so I'd do some business in West Portal. And I remember, like, I was, like, walking on air. It's so sick, but I was so happy that I discovered this new life that, like was gonna be the answer. And I really felt like, oh, look at those other people that are going to work and going to school. They're so dumb. Like, they don't know that this is where it's at. So, like, just very judgmental and really separated from the world. And I was very antisocial. I only drank with people. I didn't do anything else with people. I didn't go to lunch with you. I didn't have coffee with you. I didn't have dinner with you. I didn't help you move. I didn't want you to help me move. If we weren't drinking, I didn't want to see you. I didn't want to be around people. And I didn't know that was not being social. I thought that if you drank with people, and that's all you did with people, you were social. And, I was a very euphoric kind of drinker. It just made me feel the opposite of depressed. I just felt so happy when I drank. And about 5 years before I got sober, 4 or 5 years, those last 4 or 5 years, things changed a little bit. I had never been like a sloppy drunk. I drank a lot, but didn't fall down, things like that, or dance on tables. But then in the last 4 or 5 years, things got kind of different, and that's where, like, at the end of the night, I would be, like, curled up under your coffee table, like, crying hysterically, or in your bathtub crying hysterically, or I'd have crawled up in your loft bed and was crying hysterically, or like, just like somewhere on the floor crying hysterically. And that was really weird. That was really different. That was new. That I had not been that kind of drunk before. And in those last years, nights would end that way, and people had to find someone to take me home, like get on their phone and call people, like, can you pick Jennifer up? And try to get me in bed. And my sister was always really nice about it. One time I was curled up under her coffee table and I was crying hysterically, and so she got on the floor and curled up next to me, and she started crying too, which was very sweet. But there are a couple other people in my life, and that wasn't so funny to them. Like, there were 2 guys in my life that I really loved and cared about, and they often had to see me that way and try to get me to bed. And I feel like they were kind of disgusted in a way. They were kind of like, what is your problem? Like, this is not cool. And so the very end, that's what it was like at the very end. The end for me was at Carlton Street, which I think is like less than a mile that way. And I was looking for a place to live, and I had gone and looked at a house up in the Berkeley Hills, and there were these nice people there, and they had a room in a beautiful house that had a deck and a view sort of the whole bay from north to south. And they were offering a room, and then they were like, oh, and it comes with this other room, like an office for you. And I do research, and I need an office. And then this other place I looked at was on Carlton Street, and it was like they called it a bungalow, but it was like a shack. The floor was slanted, and it was like behind an apartment building in a really bad neighborhood. And the guy that lived there, he was a stranger to me, and he shared with me, he was like, I'm bipolar, and I was like, that's awesome. There was no common area. It's like we just like locked ourselves in our rooms, and so these people at the beautiful house called to offer me the room, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna take this other place that I found, and which was more expensive, and I couldn't live with these normal people. Like, I was not a normal person. I didn't, right? Like, how could I be living in this beautiful house in the hills with these normal people if I'm a person who's, passed out drunk on the floor at night? So I was at Carlton Street, and by now I drank alone, and I drank in my car, and I drank in my car when I was driving, and I drank on the way to go drink, and I drank on the way home from drinking, and I'm not a person. I drank a lot, but I didn't pass out. I have really bad insomnia, so I'm like a person that like hangs on, and like I will not lose consciousness. So like I would be super drunk, and I'd be passed out on the floor on my own, unable to get up, and crying like I wasn't happy. And I remember at that time there were two people in my life that I loved and cared about, and a few months prior I'd hit a cyclist. I was driving down Broadway and I hit a cyclist. He lived, he's fine. Also, because I couldn't sleep, I was drinking all the time, but I couldn't really sleep, and I was prescribed a lot of downers, so I was taking all these downers and drinking at the same time, and one of my kidneys stopped working, and I had to have surgery on my kidney. So I've had these things happen. I'm face down on the floor on Carlton Street, and I call these two guys that I know separately on different nights. And I hadn't told anyone that I'd hit the cyclist. I mean, the police knew, and the people at the hospital knew. And I'm very separated from the world. I'm kind of living this secret life. And so I'm calling these people hysterically, and I'm saying things that don't, like, oh, I did bad things. Like, it doesn't make sense, and I'm crying, and they each said the same thing. They were like, go to bed. And I remember thinking to myself, like, don't you think that if I could go to sleep, I'd go to sleep? Like, I can't go to sleep. I can't stop drinking. I can't stop crying. Like, something's really wrong. And if all the help I could get from the two closest people in my life was, you should go to sleep, I realized at that moment, like, I'd reached the end. Like, what could I do? Alcohol. I couldn't drink anymore. That didn't work. And the world didn't have anything that I could work with. No one could reach me. So I was all alone, but nothing was going to change. And so that's when I was about 35 years old, so I'd been using for just about 20 years. When I said to myself, like, it's done. And I decided to go to rehab. And the first day I was supposed to go, I couldn't go because I was still drunk. So even then, to get to rehab was so hard. And I remember how in the couple years leading up to going to rehab, the psychiatrist had been suggesting, like very strongly suggesting, rehab and getting clean and sober. And I was like, oh yeah, no, okay, fine, thanks, whatever. And here it was, like, I wanted what they were offering me, and I couldn't, like, I was drunk, I couldn't even get to my freaking appointment. And I was upset. that was incomprehensible demoralization. It was like, oh man, I am screwed. And I got to rehab. I was there for 63 days. I came out, like I said, I was sneaking drinks. Finally, a friend of mine who we lived together, we used to drink together, and she'd gotten sober about 7 years before me. Her name is Donna, and she took me to my first meeting. She took me to High Noon. And then I started going to meetings, and I was going to a meeting called Sister Circle. I started going to meetings in September, and in January, I went to Sister Circle, and my sponsor, who only had maybe 9 months more than me, she said, you know, blah, 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 you need a sponsor? I'll sponsor you. And I was like, okay. And I'd never done anything like that before. I'd never said yes, you know, like, I'd been on Earth for a while, like, I'd been around, like, I'd been to school for a long time. I have 2 master's degrees. I'd been taught a lot of things. I'd had a lot of ideas presented to me, right? Like, psychological ideas and philosophical ideas and sociological ideas, and everything that was presented to me in my life, I listened to like halfway, and then I would be like, that's bullshit. Like, because nothing worked for me. So my answer was like, that theory's bullshit. Like, it doesn't work for me, or, you know, look at the world, it doesn't work for the world. So, all types of information that had come my way, my response was like, F that is lame, that is not true, that doesn't work. And then I come here, and for the first time, I don't think like that anymore. For the first time in my whole life, I'm like, you're right, you guys are right. I believe what you said, right? Like, people would share, they had more time than me, and they would share about what happened in sobriety, and I would be like, okay, I'm not there yet, but I bet if I stay sober, those things will happen, good or bad. It's like, I'm not experiencing that, but I believe you. The first and only time in my life. And it's not like some virtue on my part. It's just that I'd been beaten down, right? I'd been beaten into the state of reasonableness, unfortunately or fortunately. And we began work together, and I knew I was an alcoholic. I'd known for a long time. I accepted that. I accepted the first step. We read Bill's story, so that's like my first experience of the book, and I was like, this is weird. This is a really weird book. I was like, this guy promised his wife he wouldn't drink? Like, who does that? I was like, I wouldn't promise anyone I wouldn't drink. And he had this, it seemed like he had this sense for the material world. He wanted to do things, and he believed in the world. And I was like, who is this alcoholic? This guy is so strange. So I felt like I didn't relate, and I thought it was super odd. But here was my thinking. I thought, okay, this book is weird. I am a hopeless alcoholic. I need this program. It will save my life. Nothing else has in this will. This program is based on this book. This book will save my life. It doesn't matter if I think it's weird. Totally different thinking. Never had thinking like that before. First time that I started thinking reasonably. So it didn't matter what I thought of the book. It didn't matter what I thought of meetings or people. All I had to do is what you told me to do. Second step, I believed in God, and when I got here, I felt that the fact that I hadn't killed that cyclist or maimed him, I was very, very grateful to God. I thought that was a miracle. I also thought it was a miracle that I wasn't drinking when I finally stopped drinking. And to me, that was God in my life. But that's not necessarily how it is for other people. I know from working with sponsees, they could have those experiences and be like, that's not God. And so that's a tough one. But they're working with someone else now. But I really do love we agnostics in the book. To me, it's a discussion of how reasonable and sane was our thinking about God or a potential higher power. How prejudiced was it, or how unprejudiced was it? Or do we actually have faith in things we don't see? In that chapter it says, yeah, we do. Our whole life is built up on faith that we have on things we can't see. The third step, I was really willing to hand my life and my will over to the care of God as I understood God. But what happened is what that meant to me changed. I was willing to hand over sobriety to God, but then I encountered things in sobriety that you encountered too. Being upset and disappointed, angry. That I remember talking to my sponsor about, and her saying, "Well, you're going to have to hand this over to God." And I was just like, what? Like, that's so weird. Like, that just shows me what my concept of God was like before, right? It's very abstract and really distant and not a part of every moment of my everyday life. And the fruition of step 3, that unfolding, is that God being a real personal presence in my life for every single aspect of my life. So one of the things that was the hardest to understand was about relationships. Like, I felt really sad. Felt like I was losing a person. And when she said, well, you're going to hand that over to God, and God is going to take that place in your life of that longing you have in your heart. And it's just like, God can do that. And that was the beginning of that change, of handing everything over to God, really living for God and to serve people. Steps 4 and 5 totally changed my life. When I read my 5th step to my sponsor, I remember I felt like having relationships with people were really problematic because they would annoy you and it would be difficult and painful, so I'm not going to do that, and then I won't have all the resentments. Well, it turns out my 5th step, I have all these resentments towards like abstract concepts, like, and organizations, right? So I thought I was bypassing what would be troublesome in life, and I just end up with all this like burning resentments, like flaming anger about these things that you wonder if they even have anything to do with me. And so I come to her and I'm reading her these resentments, and they're like, the United Nations. I'm mad at people who think Muslims are terrorists, and I'm mad at people who are anti-gay, and I'm mad at the government, and the serenity prayer, I hate it. And she was like, what does that have to do with you? Like, so we would kind of unpack that idea, and like with the serenity prayer, I was like, well, it's so corny. And she's like, so what? And I was like, well, if we have to say this corny stuff and then we think it's helping us, but it isn't really. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, then no one will get, help. And she's like, oh, wow. Okay, so you're like the judge of if the serenity prayer is going to help people or not? And things like being really angry with the way things are being run in the world or whatever. And I would say, well, these people have all this money and then these people have nothing and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, well, how were you with your money when you were like using drugs and alcohol for 13 years straight? Were you really generous with your money and altruistically help poor people? So I guess that was like a really awesome experience. I was sort of at the end of my fist up with her. I remember I was like laughing kind of like deliriously and maniacally, like I had gone a little crazy after reading these things for like 5 hours. But I remember then 6 and 7 really feeling like I'm my problem. Oh my God. Like my self-righteousness and my pride and my hypocrisy and my whatever. Ignorance, right? I'm my problem. And I remember for step 7 hitting my knees, and I don't know why. I was just like praying. I was like, I don't want to be like this anymore. Like, which really it's up to God what way I'm going to be. But I was just like, I don't want to be hypocritical and self-righteous and judgmental. And I just don't want to be those things anymore because that's what makes me unhappy. So I didn't really have that big feeling of relief when I finished my 5th set because that's when I had to share with my sponsor that I had been drinking mouthwash. And I was afraid when she was like, oh, well, you have to go share it at a group level. But then it was at 7th step when I got on my knees and I was like, oh, please relieve me of these character defects. And I felt huge relief. So, you get the promises whenever they're, and the relief whenever it's right for you, I think. And 8 and 9, I got to make amends. You were talking about to your parents, like that's pretty tough. I remember it was time to make amends to my dad and his wife, and they live in another city. And my sponsor is just really a extroverted, get it done, problem solver kind of person. So I was like, well, I'm going to visit my dad this week. And she's like, good, you can make amends to him. Who else is going to be there? Oh, his wife. She's like, good, you can make amends to her too. And it turned out that it was a family reunion that weekend. I only made amends to 2 people. But I remember, like, we were at my grandparents' and it was the morning and people were reading the paper and playing darts and running around. And I was like sitting on a bench and I was like, ooh. And my sister came over and she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have to make amends to Dad. And she was like, you are so weird. And then she walked away and I was like, why do I have to do this? And, I made the amends and I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't wish that I could be playing darts or reading the paper or have it any other way, right? Like, yeah, I feel scared at that moment and I feel stupid, like, oh. But in return, I get serenity and I get peace and I get all these other things. So sometimes it comes down to that moment when we have to make that amends or do something right. And it's scary and it's painful, but the rest of our life, we get peace and freedom. And to me, it's totally worth it. And the hardest step for me, step 12 is the hardest step for me. To working one-on-one with another woman is really it's always been really scary to me. And I've had sponsees. I don't have sponsees now. But the cool thing is, 2 of the sponsees that I did have, they stay in contact with me. And so sometimes I get a phone call from one of them, and that's really sweet. And they want a suggestion. They want to discuss something with me, and they want to talk it out, and they want a suggestion, and that's really nice. And I remember, too, one of my sponsees was like, oh, I hate going to meetings. I don't get anything out of them. I hate this program. And I was like, okay, what meeting are you going to tonight? She told me, and I was like, okay, call me after the meeting. You can call me or you can text me, and you can tell me what you heard the solution was. It can be one thing or a couple things. And then I forget about that, and I go about my business, and then later I get a text, and it says, God is the solution. And, right, like, that's awesome. I need that. Like, I get a sponsee texting me that, and I still have it in my phone because I need to see that. And that is the awesome part about having sponsees. They tell you what the solution is. Sometimes. And I guess just a little bit, I'll wrap it up. My life now. My dad, who I made amends to a couple years ago, he passed away in November. He had a really big heart attack. From the time he had his heart attack to a couple months later when he passed away, I got to be there with him a lot of the time. And I'm so grateful that this program asked of me to make amends to him. I didn't know at the time that he was going to pass away 2 years later. So this program has a kind of logic that works way beyond what I would ever imagine. So I believe in it. It really showed itself to me this last year. I work at Mills College. I work in the library. It's kind of like my dream come true. It's all I ever really wanted from life was work in a library at a college. And I also just got hired as a teacher in the parolee education program of Oakland, which, if you're an introvert, like, teaching is kind of scary, but it's pretty awesome. And I'm not a depressed person. I get nervous sometimes, but I have a lot of serenity. And it's all from this program. And a lot of things are none of my business. Like, I have a lot of serenity because of that. This program teaches me that. Like, really, other people's conduct is not my business. My conduct is my business. There's a lot of stuff going on now, people posting things about politics, and it's like, am I working for justice? If I am, fine, that's all that matters. If I'm not, then I have no right to be saying what other people should be doing. And so I have a lot of serenity. I have a lot of gratitude. I have a life, I think, like you said, beyond my wildest dreams. I'm super, super grateful. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.